Member for Kalgoorlie.
Deputy Speaker, I rise today to provide my input into the Local Government Reform Amendment Bill 2023. And firstly, I'd like to commend the Minister for Local Government for having the foresight and drive to tackle a difficult and potentially controversial reform agenda. Local governments are different entities, and sometimes the last bastion of democracy in a town or city. There wouldn't be very many areas that haven't seen some very difficult and unpopular decisions being made. So it's fantastic that the McGowan government is delivering the most significant reforms to the system of local government in Western Australia in more than 25 years. This bill delivers a range of reforms that will deliver greater transparency and accountability for ratepayers, as well as cost savings and efficiencies for local governments. The reforms were subject to an extensive public consultation process and enabled some of them to be refined, enabling the best possible outcomes. At the heart of these reforms is the intent to strengthen how local governments work together to deliver to local communities across Western Australia. And the core of these reforms to the Local Government Act 1995 is updating the principles that will include standardising procedures for council meetings across the state, a range of new mandated transparency measures to provide increased access and greater public confidence in the operations of local government reforms to simplify council planning, and the introduction of optional preferential voting to bring local government elections more in line with state, federal elections, and other changes to make local governments more consistent and efficient. Other significant reforms, including the new local government inspector, also be in progress and not part of this bill. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to use this time to highlight how these reforms will assist with transparency and accountability in my electorate of Kalgoorlie. One of the first elements I'd like to touch on is the establishment to recognise Aboriginal West Australians, underline the importance of considering sustainability, climate change and intergenerational issues, and promoting collaboration between local governments. We're about to have a referendum to alter the Constitution so that it establishes an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. It's long, long overdue. So critically, these principles have been drafted in recognition that every local government must consider these important principles in the unique specific conditions within its district. This bill also delivers on formalising tiers of local government, which recognises the immense diversity of 139 local governments which operate under the Act. There are huge differences in local governments across Western Australia, from metro councils with more than 200,000 residents to rural shires with only a few hundred people living in the district. Some local governments have more than 1,000 staff, while others are run with less than 30. These changes mean that regulations can set different requirements for larger and smaller governments. For instance, financial reporting requirements can reflect the size and complexity of a local government operation. Regional shires don't operate on the same level of complexity that many metro local governments may do. It is important that regulations can be matched to the size and complexity of local governments, and the McGowan government is committed to reducing red tape for these local governments, and I know that smaller local government shires in my electorate will be grateful for this. The key reform that has caused the most discussion in the city of Kalgoorlie-Boulder in my electorate is the reform to better align the size of councils across Western Australia with the population of the local government's district. The bill sets limits based on the local government's population. For a population up to 5,000, there will be 5 to 7 councillors, including the President. For a population between 5,000 and 75,000, there will be 5 to 9 councillors, including the Mayor or President. And for a population over 75,000, 9 to 15 councillors, including the Mayor. This was the recommendation of a panel report to government in 2020, and these values are also refined through the public submissions. The reality is that West Australia is overgoverned. There are more than 1,100 council members across Western Australia. We see that councils typically work best when all council members can work through differences of opinion and find consensus on how to best deliver for the local community. There are cost implications having a higher number of elected members, which costs ratepayers more money. Put simply, this bill will provide consistency with regard to representation and formalising the link between the number of electors and council members. This reform will mean that the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder will be reduced from 12 councillors plus a mayor to 8 councillors plus the mayor. In purely monetary value, this will see a savings of $126,712 in elected member salaries and fees to ratepayers each year. So let me provide an overview about how this was received by the council in Kalgoorlie-Boulder. At a special council meeting in August 2022, councillors were asked how they would prefer to cut their current numbers. The Minister presented each local government with the opportunity to indicate whether they would like to take a voluntary or reform election pathway before the bill's introduction. The voluntary pathway would include reducing councillor numbers by at least 5 at the next 2 elections, by electing 4 councillors rather than 6, as well as the mayoral position. Under the reform election pathway option, all council positions would be declared vacant. Deputy Speaker, much has been said in the media about how this was dealt with in Kalgoorlie-Boulder. The Minister said last year, clearly the state government's intentions and his reform agenda were clear. They're also stating that currently the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder was over-governed. The Minister's comments came after the Mayor argued that determining Kalgoorlie-Boulder's elected member representation based on the population discounted the unique parameters of the Goldfields Council's responsibilities. The Minister stated that this state government is strengthening the transparency, accountability and efficiency of local governments, and this set of electoral reforms will enable fairer local democracy and community engagement. And who can argue with that? In December last year, when it came time for the decision of the Kalgoorlie-Boulder councillors, what would they prefer to achieve the Cal decision point, they failed to reach an absolute majority, with 5 councillors going for a spill and 5 hoping for a change to occur over the next 2 elections. Their indecision came after locals were asked to have their say about how they saw the extra positions being removed. The consultation voted 72% for a full spill. Fast forward to 3 weeks ago. Minister Carey was in Kalgoorlie-Boulder and he was questioned about the position of the number of councillors. The Minister made it very clear that because of the indecision by elected members about how to eliminate the 4 seats, it meant that all the positions on council would become vacant. In addition, the Minister said that while the majority of local governments had decided on the transitional option, some did choose a full spill, but not many were unable to come to a decision. Kalgoorlie is pretty unique in that it sort of appeared to throw up his hands and say we can't make any position clear, the Minister said. I further quote the Minister. In doing so, they effectively made a decision for their community, and that decision is that they'll be spilling a full council. No resolution is a resolution. I must respectfully say that it was pretty clear. Most local governments have been able to navigate this. Most local governments have come to a position. Kalgoorlie is pretty unique. From memory, and that is one of the few councillors going through this process that has appeared to have said, this is too hard, while most other governments have actually done it. The City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder Mayor then said the full spill was probably the best way to go about the reduction. Particularly, he said, as there was a lot of negative comments in the community about the council. So a fresh start, new system, new numbers, and it will give the people of Kalgoorlie-Boulder a chance for a fresh start. So here's the thing, we now have a complete backflip, with the Mayor saying, look now, I think 8 councillors and a Mayor is good. And the biggest thing is that I hope the people of Kalgoorlie-Boulder turn out in big numbers and cast their votes for a new council. Amen to that. I've often been critical about the lack of community engagement by some local governments. So the reform about community engagement is welcomed in these reforms. Under this bill, every council will need to adopt a community engagement charter. These charters are to provide a stronger framework for how a local government is to engage with people in their district. This is especially important to ensure that public engagement involves a diverse range of voices and is generally inclusive. People in my electorate are always asking me about opportunities to engage with local government about community issues, and they've often found themselves without a voice. This bill provides for regulations to set requirements on how local governments are to engage into their community. So my community is now going to have that voice. As part of the reforms, the state government is working to introduce a requirement that all local governments in bands 1 and 2 must hold a ratepayer satisfaction survey at least every 4 years. Specific questions that must be asked will be set so that the results can be compared between local governments. In line with this important transparency, the reforms will also mandate communication agreements between council members and the local government administration, the requirement for all local governments to publish information through online registers, and the requirement of the publication of performance indicators and results for all local government chief executives. This will provide ratepayers with a clear line of sight about how local governments are allocating resources and finances. This bill is a major milestone in the delivery of the McGowan government's local government reform agenda, which is the biggest set of changes for more than 25 years. Work is also continuing in the next tranche of legislation, which will establish the new local government inspector and monitors. The inspector will overhaul the oversight of local government across Western Australia. The inspector will have strong powers to investigate and respond to dysfunction in local governments. Together, the establishment of the inspector and monitors will enable problems within local governments to be addressed at a much earlier stage. For example, if there's a breakdown of professional working relationships within a local government, the inspector will be able to send in a monitor who has specific mediation skills to address the conflict. Oh, how I wish that this was available about 2 to 3 years ago. Make no mistake, this government is delivering positive local government reforms that will benefit ratepayers across Western Australia for decades to come. I've been vocal in this House of issues and concerns I've had previously with the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder, and I look forward to seeing these important local government reforms being implemented. I believe that the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder's council, the staff, its community, industry and business deserve the transparency and accountability that these reforms will bring. And that's worth repeating, transparency and accountability. It is essential that every dollar spent in local government benefits the ratepayers and small business and is transparency accounted for. These reforms have been a long time coming, and I am pleased to commend the bill to the House.